Hello, here's Mark Galeotti from Moscow with another one of my various ruminations on Russian politics. It's a late, unexpected Indian summer here, but on the other hand, the political temperature is really quite uncertain because of the recent local elections. And people are very much asking, well, okay, what's the Kremlin's strategy? And of course, the answer is actually the Kremlin doesn't tend to start with strategies. At best, it ends with them. At the moment, what we see is the usual process whereby all kinds of different perspectives, ideas, tactics, strategies, stratagems, and visions of the future are being floated by a whole variety of different actors inside and outside the immediate government circle, both as a way of stimulating discussion, but also more importantly, in the hope that one way or the other they can actually get the boss to indicate what is his future. Because of course, the big issue is, although there are all kinds of more immediate questions, not least the State Duma, the parliamentary elections that are coming up in a couple of years, the big question is, until there is a clear steer as to what will happen in 2024 when Putin's current term in office ends, whether he's going to find some way of staying, whether he's going to find a successor or whatever, until that is resolved, it's actually almost impossible to come up with anything more than stopgap solutions. Nonetheless, I think it's worth pointing out some of the lessons that seem to have been drawn, or at least that people are presenting from the most recent local elections that took place here. First of all, although some people are saying, oh no, actually it's proved that the United Russia bloc, the main pro-government party, actually still has life in it, it's very hard to see it. I mean, when even your own candidates find you so toxic that they actually make their whole election campaign as an independent without even admitting that they are actually part of your bloc, you have a problem. Secondly, we had the advent of Alexei Navalny, the opposition challenger, and his smart vote strategy, which essentially said, tell us where you are and we'll tell you who to vote for, whoever has the best chance of displacing the pro-government candidate. And in fact, particularly in Moscow, it's certainly had some considerable success. We shouldn't overplay it though. I mean, a lot of the people who voted for, particularly the communist candidates, did so because they wanted to vote for the communist candidates, not because Navalny told them. But nonetheless, I think if you put all this together, what has really been demonstrated is the extent to which there is considerable dissatisfaction with what's going on. It's not that people are necessarily saying we need a complete change in government or anything like that. Instead, they are just simply saying that the social contract that, as far as they were concerned, they were offered by Putin in the very early Putin years, which was, you stay out of politics, you let us run the country, and don't worry, your life will continue to get better. Well, that's being broken. And there's more or less this sense of saying, well, okay, where's the deal now? It's quite striking, after all, when early this year Putin had his direct line, a big sort of annual phone-in to the people. And a lot of people rang in with very real practical concerns. And just saying, basically, life is getting hard. And what could Putin offer? The only thing he replied, in what I thought was singularly tone-deaf response, was essentially to tell them that they were wrong and that he had the statistics to prove it. Well, you can't convince people their lives are getting better with statistics, especially when the statistics are so heavily massaged. But the other interesting point, though, is they were still ringing Putin about it. It's not that they're necessarily looking for something totally different. They're still willing to basically say, look, we are happy to return to that social contract, but you've got to deliver. We'll have to see what happens. The government, I think, is holding on to this notion that in a couple of years' time, its grand national project strategy, a whole series of major investments and other targets, will begin to be bearing genuine fruit and people will actually feel better about it. So by the time it comes to 2024, the edge of dissatisfaction will have been at the very least blunted and at best actually gone totally. It's quite a gamble though. I suspect that in the short term we are going to see more attempts at some crowd-pleasing developments. We're going to see more money being spent on infrastructure, on social payments. There's currently a debate going on within the government between the chair of the central bank, Nabulina, and the Minister of Economic Development, Areshkin, about whether or not it's time to actually start spending some of Russia's very large financial reserves on stimulus packages and so forth. And that's really a question of dealing with the immediate challenge. But we come back to this point that on one level these local elections meant very little. Look, Russian elections in the current system are not about who wins. We know ultimately who's going to win in the big picture terms. It is more how much resource, in terms of money, in terms of propaganda, in terms of oppression of rival candidates and so forth, and in terms of its basic legitimacy, is the state going to have to spend to get the results it wants? And I think this is the key point. No, revolution's not coming next Wednesday. No, Navalny is not going to be carried to the Kremlin by a mob of adoring fans. It's more about how much resource is the Kremlin having to spend, and does it feel it can afford to do so? So this is an interesting time. The weather is fine, the sun is shining, and here and now, frankly, the Kremlin and its people can be quite happy. They endured these elections. Out in the provinces, they got the results they wanted. Here in Moscow, not so much, but on the other hand, the momentum for the protest movement has pretty much dissipated. It's unlikely that for the moment, until there's some new spark, that we will see anything happen. So the streets are quiet and happy. But these big imponderables remain. What is going to happen to the economy? How does this impact how ordinary Russians feel? What are they going to do about it? Is the state going to have the resources it needs to basically be able to work its way through this crisis? And above all that, hanging over everything, the thing that makes it impossible, as I say, to develop any meaningful strategy. What is Putin going to do? And here's the irony. At the moment, Putin is exceedingly busy internationally. But domestically, he's pretty much absent. Sure, he comes for the ceremonials, but in terms of actually really giving that steer, really giving a sense of where this country is going, Putin is absent.